Morning. Beautiful day again, absolutely beautiful. I'm just forking the garden over, getting ready for planting a few vegetables a little bit later on when it gets a bit warmer. And while I'm digging it over, I always carry a tub with me and I collect worms. And what I do is in here I've got some compost, tea leaves, I put in some old vegetables and a bit of damp and shredded newspaper in a bit. And then what I'll do, I'll drill holes in the bottom of this one, and I've got another one of these, and I sit this in the top so that the moisture can drain through, but the holes are small enough not to let the worms get through. And I put that away in the shed. I've got several of these. I do it every year. What I do is I breed enough worms then to last me the season. And worms are a really excellent bait and dead cheap. The worst thing about getting worms is obviously trying to go out into your garden and dig them up. But rather than do that every time I go fishing, as I said, I do it once a year. I've got several lots of these kicking around in the shed, and not only do they provide me with lots of worms, but they also provide me with quite a bit of compost as well for the garden and the flowers. Plus it gives me some exercise. So, I don't know if many of you use worms, but they're an absolute top-rated bait. No matter what you're fishing for, everything likes worms. And a lot of top match anglers get through quite a few worms, and you'll find that a lot of them have got their own wormeries. And I'm not surprised, because I've just been down the tackle shop, and for a pot of 10 lobworms it's £2.95, and for a pot of red worms it's £1.95. I don't know how many red worms you get in a pot, but you get 10 lobworms to a pot. So that's quite an expensive way to buy worms, and there's no need to. As long as you've got a bit of room, somewhere to store them, it's, as I said, ever so easy to do. Any 2 containers will do. You can use a couple of black buckets, you can buy yourself some old bins and do it that way. But that's all you need to do, is in the top bucket, it needs to have holes drilled in the bottom to let the liquid drain through. That sits straight in on the top of the other one. And then you just feed them with tea bags and old vegetables and bits of newspaper. They'll mulch their way through it, and once they've worked their way through it, I then transfer them to another container and clean the old one out, put a handful of the worms I've already got back into here, start the process off again. So I've got a continual supply of worms then. You can buy proper wormeries. If you look on eBay, you'll see them. I think they're from about 59 quid upwards in price, that work on the bottom layer is a sump, and then they work on a 2 or 3 tier system upwards, and I'm sure you can buy other tiers to add on. And what you do is, once one's complete, you do exactly the same thing. You move some of the worms to another container and start the process off again. but I've not got round to buying one. I've never found the need, but they're a lot tidier to use. You don't have to have loads of buckets hanging around, but every year I buy, these are old bird feed buckets. They contain fat balls, and every year I buy one of these to feed to the birds, so I've got a good supply of them kicking about. And it doesn't cost me anything. And every year I'm doing the garden, so it's easy enough for me to do, to constantly get a good supply. And of course, once you've got a few containers and you've got them breeding, which takes about 3 to 4 months on the breeding cycle, you know, Bob's your uncle, you're away. And it's well worth doing. Anyway, I'm going to carry on doing the garden. Right, I'll call it a day for the moment. Got to build myself up slowly. Look at those beauties. So I've done a little bit of digging, which I do anyway, and look at that. I've got loads, absolutely loads of lobworms. I've got some reds in there as well. I've got some dendrobenas, and I'll separate these out and put them in different pots, and they'll supplement the ones that I've got in the other containers as well. And as I said, I'll have a continual supply of worms all year round, and all for very little effort and very little keeping. Just feed them once a week, look in there, see when the feed's gone, when your stuff's been turned to compost, and keep topping that up. And that's all you've got to do, as simple as that. Make sure they stay damp, and you'll have as many worms as you could possibly need. Those of you that perhaps haven't got a bit of garden to dig and want to start it off, you can either pay out for a pot of lobworms from the tackle shop in the first place and put them in here, or go down to your local grass field or park on a very wet night with a torch, and you'll see the lobworms lying up on the surface, and just grab a few, put them in a container, and you can do it that way. Anyway, until the next time, once again, thank you very much for watching, and I wish you all the best with your angling.